Okay, there we go. Thanks.
What's the real issue? It's a ton of research and investigation. There's nothing like as much time as it takes. So my art EHR is sort of my like baby. Like I know the ins and outs of it, how it's being used, how it's not being used, a lot of the failure points in it. I know most of them. But it's because I've done a lot of auditing it. So it's like, I love being able to put together a story just by opening up the record and figuring out what was going on. Like, can I put together what happened when? And I love timestamps and like, let me put together a nice little timeline for you. And that's what I do over and over again. I do a lot of education. So really kind of understanding, oh, someone tells me this doesn't work. Well, wait, what are you doing? Like, help me understand how you're using it. And I take a lot of opportunity to go, oh my gosh, you're doing that so wrong, is what I think on the inside. And then on the outside, I stay calm and I'm like, let me show you how to do that better. Or sure, let me help you use that the right way. So that's really, I'm constantly sort of in that process of assessing and then trying to fix sort of on the fly or assess really what the heart of the issue is. One of my biggest ones that I do all the time is identifying process or workflow problems. A lot of times things that come up, you know, if something's really broken in our system, that is not me. It's like, let's send that over to IT. Those guys know what to do. They're my partners, but they know what to do and how to fix it. But a lot of what we come across, or a lot of what I come across, are workflow problems. So it's a workflow misalignment with the technology. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's one of my, like the biggest things. And actually that's probably one of the biggest challenges to solve is to go, okay, we have a misalignment. So what do we fix? Do we fix the workflow or do we fix the technology? And it's sort of this competing battle to see like, okay, gosh, well, if we change that workflow, how many people do we have to train on that? And then we have to educate, and what does that look like? And oh my God, and then people aren't gonna do it. And so it's kind of like, right? So then it's like, okay, well, maybe we can merge them. So maybe we need to change both. And it's really interesting, and kind of where we're at right now with our technology and our systems is going, okay, well, we drop technology right on top of that really bad process. And that happens all the time. And instead of like fixing the process, we threw technology at it, or we just put in technology and didn't deal with the process. And it's like, okay, let's come back and revisit this. Why did we do this like 10-step workflow and then do this horrible technology practice? Like, why are we trying to get to here? Like, what's the point of getting to there? And that's what actually we've had to do recently with a couple of things with my partners is, you know, we had the request to, hey, make this paper form electronic. Okay. And we went about doing that and bringing teams together, and they're like yelling at each other and like these heated conversations. And it was like, well, who the heck cares what's on that form? So it was like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, let's do that. Let's go back to who cares what's on here? And maybe we need to figure out for them, what do they really need? Why do we need this form? That was a Band-Aid we put in place several years ago. Let's look at here and now. Who needs the information and why do they need it and when do they need it? And let's assess how do we fix that and not just make this paper electronic. I think I got everything on here. So who do I work with? I think it might be easier to say who don't I work with. I, at some point or another, have worked with almost every role within our organization. Like I said, my biggest customers are nursing, physicians, pharmacy, IT. I mean, IT, they aren't even my customers, they're my partners. Like, we are connected hand in hand. They are sometimes my best and most challenging partners to work with. And I love working with them. I'll tell you why. They're black and white. It's like black and white, and I am all about the gray. I'm like, no, let's like figure it out. And I was just saying this morning, two of my least favorite statements from IT, it's hard-coded, and it's not technically possible. And every time I hear those words, it's like, challenge accepted. And that's what I'm supposed to do in informatics. You know, that's part of what my role is because I have clinicians or end users, whatever role they're in. I have people that are wanting to leverage our technology, and maybe how they think we should leverage it can't be done, not technically possible. But that's with my partnership with my IT partners. And so they've actually, over time, have really improved and increased their, like when I ask them questions, they're like, okay, what are you really asking me, Brianna? And so I'm like, well, this is what I want to do. Like, this is where we're trying to go. And so we have some really dynamic conversations, and like, they'll go back and research and say, oh, you know, I found this tool or I found that tool. So it's a really fun way to like problem solve. I mean, I guess that's really what I do at the end of every single day. I'm problem solving nonstop. So it's fun, but it's challenging. I work with leaders across the organization, application specialists, which like are in IT, and they kind of are subject matter or systems experts. Finance, our PC techs, so people who are out dealing with hardware, operating systems, and a lot more. So I work with all kinds of people all the time. So a day in the life of what I do. Email is first. I swear, I think everyone's probably drowning in email. It's just an effective means for communication sometimes. I've learned, like, if it's going to take more than like 2 emails back and forth, it's probably worth having a conversation. Committee meetings and variety of meetings. This is kind of how I would get work done. A lot of times that I have to do things, I'm, you know, doing planning, assessing like education, sharing updates, a lot of phone calls, face-to-face as much as I can, although WebEx is like one of my best friends because with being part of the district, so I'm here in Escondido, we have a Poway campus, we have downtown, and so I could like be all over the place, which just with 8, 9, 10 hours in the day, it just is not enough time. Creating education or delivering education, a lot of times it's on the fly, just like, oh, hey, here's a problem, let's solve it. I do try to work through the right process and have the right people do the education because my skill set is not specifically in delivering education to adult learners. We have a specific group of people that does that. So I do try to work with them, but there's a lot that I just am doing throughout my day. Research and investigation into questions and confusion, and then really clarification on like workflows, the intended design of things. That's one of the things that I encounter a lot of times is, why did we do it like that? Or, you know, this isn't doing this. And it's like, well, that's not what it was intended for. Like, this is how it was supposed to be used. And then the fun stuff, the part that I just like love doing is really like the expertise consultation and input. And so we'll get into that a little bit more related to, you know, knowing like how things work behind the scenes, really like figuring out like, oh, this is a really like hard problem. How can we fix it? I love doing that part of it. And it's just like the learning and the uncovering and like finding those hidden gems or finding those like, oh, that's the problem. Like that's my favorite thing when I can point at one thing and like, okay, we'll eliminate that and that solved it. It doesn't usually work like that, but that's fun. Assessing new technology. That is really a lot of fun. I made sure to kind of call out some vaporware. I don't know if anyone's heard of vaporware before. So it is like, looks great, sounds great. They have a demo for you. Look how great it works. But that's all it is. It's just a facade. It's kind of like there's no real validated that it really works with anything else. Yeah. So it's just like, it's just kind of a looks really nice, looks really pretty, nice user interface, but then there's nothing behind the scenes. Or it's not really been tested out or vetted. No one in the world has used it before. They're just trying to sell it. Sometimes things like that work great. Sometimes they don't. And so it's one of those things we have to consider when we're delivering care to patients. You know, we can't bring in vaporware. Like we can't, especially if it's stuff when it comes to patient information, giving information to patients, taking information from patients, improving our clinician workflow. We really have to be conscientious when it comes to that. That's not to say that I haven't worked with some really amazing technology companies that have done like amazing things that sort of started with concepts and have rolled things out. So Sotera or Busy, I don't know if you've heard of the mobile vital signs device. We did do, you know, we were partners with them and rolled that out. And really just, I love working with them because they were about the patient. They were about patient safety and really making sure that patients, you know, that we were delivering the right information about the patients to the right people. And that's like the best type of environment to work in. I swear, it really is. And then collaboration with others. I could not be successful in my job without doing that. I just couldn't. I couldn't just sit in a room and not talk to anyone else. Well, I could. I mean, I could just sit in a room and make decisions, but no one would like me. So a little bit into change management, and this is part of also what I do is really looking at how can we leverage technology better. You know, we have it out there, it's out in the world. I feel like a lot of times, or at least for me, a lot of times where we're at, I feel really behind in technology. You know, I look like where the outside world is and where people are in their homes and personal devices. And then I kind of look at our hospital environment and I'm like, gosh, I feel like we're like 3 steps behind. And then I talk to other people at other organizations and I'm like, oh, we're doing good. We already did that. Okay, we're not so bad. But it's really hard. It's really challenging to go through that. And so it's really looking, you know, how can we leverage technology better to keep our patients safe, to keep our staff safe, to inform them. And it's really about getting meaningful information to people when it matters. Because I, just like your email, I can send you emails all day long. You could get spammed all day long. But that email about the great sale at the store doesn't matter until you have money in your bank account, right? So it's like, it's really about getting that right information to the right person when it matters. We talked a little bit about you know, really identifying, is that workflow issue or technology issue? And as I said before, technology will always highlight the bad workflow. We've done that so many times. You know, it was really a really amazing learning experience bringing an existing hospital campus into a brand new building, because we brought existing workflows over into a brand new workspace with completely different technology, with new technology. And I was like, this is so amazing. But we brought our same workflows. So as much as you tried to like plan around it, without actually like being in the space and knowing how things are going to work or not work or move or not move, it is designing in a box. It's like, well, we think this might work. So that's where optimization kind of comes in, to be able to, you know, have that space to say, okay, now we really need to go back and rework this. Gosh, we thought this was going to be great. No, it's not great. Let's fix that. Okay, so I am really sorry. Oh my gosh, that's like really tiny. So this is kind of the process that I use, and we start here on the idea or improvement. So for informatics, for IT, this is over and over again, this is sort of the process that we go through and kind of all of the steps that we consider along the way. So basically everything starts with either an idea or an improvement or a change. And what we try to do to kind of make sure things are vetted and are even important. That's the thing is, gosh, I think we have like 3,000, 4,000 nurses. I know we have 800 physicians, and then we have several thousand other employees. And so people all the time are thinking, oh my gosh, why don't we just do this? Why don't we just do that? Gosh, couldn't we just do this? Couldn't we just do that? And so it becomes really hard because everyone thinks maybe, you know, if they all have one idea, we're looking at like 8,000 ideas. And it doesn't mean they're all good ideas. Doesn't mean they're all bad either. But it's really looking at how important is this to more than just that person, and how is it in alignment with organizational priorities, patient priorities, things that, you know, really matter and warrant using time to deal with. So what we do through our informatics process, I'll kind of just run through this. So we have a committee that sort of reviews the needs and the requests and says, yeah, sure, that seems like it, you know, matters. It's in alignment with our priorities. And then we prioritize. So within the organization, how important is this? You know, if we have CMS coming through or government saying, hey, you need to do this by January 1st, and it's now January 23rd, I think. Yeah. So they said, oh, this needed to be in by January 1st, and now it's January 23rd. That one kind of usually shoots up in priority and getting work done. If we're at risk for losing a lot of money because we're not in alignment, again. So there's certain things that sort of help bring things up to the top and identify as a higher priority. And then what we try to do is then establish a timeline. What's a realistic timeline? How can we get this in? And then design and test. And while that is like one piece of it, that usually is the bulk of getting it done, is design, test, and educate. That takes up so much time just to get it done right, and test against all the possible variables. Implement, and then monitor for improvement. So we always like to go back and make sure, hey, is this really working? Is this meeting the need of the person who is asking for it? Or did it create an unexpected downstream impact? I've done that many times, no matter how many questions I ask. Yeah.
So when you're kind of doing this cycle, kind of back to like the financial part of it, how do you decide who's paying for what?
So it kind of depends on, that's where it gets sort of tricky. So this, we kind of, I'm glad you asked that question because it's a really good question to ask. So we have a couple of buckets. So we have a project bucket, and then we have our change bucket. So this is like our everyday changes, not quite large scale project, that needs resources. Those are kind of what I'm working through here. So it's that smaller group. And it comes from, all right, I have time, and that's where the committee that provided oversight sort of prioritized to say this is the most important thing. Because it doesn't come out of anyone's cost center. It does. I mean, it comes out of whatever cost center I'm in to say, okay, I'm allotting hours there because that's what the organization has said is the most important thing. And so as different priorities come up, there are times where I sort of have to shift and juggle what I'm working on. But they've said, okay, you guys are working out of this cost center, but you're supporting the organization. So that's where we need that prioritization. Because if it were up to me, I would probably just work on the fun stuff, and like the other stuff that I get bored with is like, wouldn't get done. So that's really where it's important to say, okay, we need to have people prioritizing to say this is the most important thing, and we want you spending your hours here. The project bucket, from a financial perspective, depending on how it goes and who's in it, there's dollars that are associated with that project. So that's where the financial piece of it is. And when they're planning that project and doing that assessment, that's where they'll identify the hours and resources that they need. So that way that can get pulled out of that cost center or pulled out of that budget to make sure they have the right people participating. Yeah, so it's usually done in the early phases. Good question though. and I kind of hit on these, but daily, weekly, monthly limitations. I mean, this is just the reality. Time, money, and resources over and over again. That's just continues to be one of the challenges, which is why it's so important to have people or have my executive team helping me prioritize what matters for us to spend our time on. And then there are always competing priorities and nothing like conflicting priorities. So nothing like having two leaders who say, mine's the most important thing. All right, well, there's one of me. I guess we'll figure it out. It's just sometimes how it goes. So I wanted to get a little bit into purchasing new technology. So who here has had to buy a new laptop in the last couple of years? All right. Who works where they provide you with a laptop? So I also work where they provide me with a laptop. And I was like, all right, I need a new laptop. And they were like, well, there's like not budget for that. I'm like, I can go to Costco or Best Buy and buy a laptop for like $500. I could buy a good one for like $1,000. And I'm like, what do you mean there's no budget? Like, really? Like, I need this to do my job. And they were like, Brianna, you don't understand. It doesn't just cost us like $500 or $600. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? They're like, no, like it ends up costing like $2,000, $2,500. And I'm like, for what? Can I save the organization money? I'll just go buy my own laptop and you can reimburse me. They're like, no. So it's been a real learning experience for me working in healthcare and doing this. I failed to mention, I've been a nurse for almost 15 years. So I've been using my computers pretty much my whole career. But this was like one of these things that I learned when I came into informatics that it like just blew my mind. When I was a bedside nurse, I was like, I don't understand. Why can't they just go buy a new computer and put it on the floor? Like connect the wires, put the Cerner on there. Come on, can you just do it? And then I learned all the behind the scenes stuff that it's never just that simple, you know, especially because we're dealing with patient information. You know, I mean, we have access to patient information. We have access to our own personal information through HR, through, you know, time and attendance. There's a lot of security stuff that has to be in place. So that was one of my like big lessons that I learned when I came to this role. I was like, help me understand this. And they were like, well, you know, we have to put, you know, this on there and we have to put that on there and then we have to set it up. And a lot of people touch the laptop before it even gets to my hands. So that was a really interesting thing. So what I wanted to do is kind of walk you through the process around bringing in new technology. And I wanted to talk to something that matters to me, is real for me here and now, and kind of just go through it. Sort of not really a case study, but just kind of to show some of the things and some of the processes that, you know, you have to go through when you're working in healthcare and implementing technology. Any questions before? I know I've been like, ugh. So everyone texts. We've been texting for years and years and years. I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking like, how long have I been texting? And I was texting even when we were just like the 9 key, like I was like super fast, like pressing that to get to the letter T and the S and oh God, I messed that one up. I actually got pretty good on that. So I was very happy once we started actually like getting keyboard on there, right? So everyone is texting. Everyone texts all the time in their personal lives. I will tell you in the hospital environment, I know people are texting. Putting it out there. I know. I'm like hoping that they're texting, not sending information, because first in our hospital, we have these bricks. They're called the Cisco 7925s. They literally look like the old school cell phones that are like the 9 keypad. And that's about how functional they are. Now, before you judge too harshly on the new pretty hospital on the hill, keep in mind when we were planning to open the doors it was, let's see, 8 years ago. 8 years ago, iPhone had barely come out on the market, or I think it had been on the market maybe for a year or two. That is not hospital grade tested technology, like in reality. That's the reality of it. So when you think about when we were planning for it, the best tools that were out there were like that phone and then the little, I can never remember, Vocera, the little single button thing, which like made a ton of noise. So like those were the types of, what was that? Yeah, and it makes a lot of noise, right? Because people can interrupt, rings through, talks, everyone can hear the conversation you're having. I mean, it's all of that stuff. So you're kind of looking at, okay, what's the best technology that's been tested in a hospital environment? Because nurses, is everyone here a nurse? Okay, so you guys know, how careful are you when you have your hospital-issued device in your pocket? Probably not as safe as you are with your own cell phone. And I know that for a fact. I drop my own cell phone all the time. And I know when I was working at the bedside, I probably was not as careful. Like I would set my phone down and I'd be like, sweep my arm around and there goes the phone, like flying across the room. Okay. So things get dropped, they're in stuff, they're around patients, they have to be disinfected. So you have to consider all of that stuff when it comes to cleaning, disinfecting, and handling. So, kind of sideline there to help you understand the here and now. Did you have a question? No? Oh, okay. Earlier it looked like you were like,
oh no, it might have been me doing that.
okay, I just wanted to make sure. So, that's kind of how we are where we are today. So, those Cisco phones that we have really are not conducive to texting. First of all, it would take forever to send a message. Second, most nurses, even though they're not supposed to, do have their phones in their pockets. I understand. So they have some physician phone numbers and they will send the physician a text. Room 538's labs came back. Hoping that's all it says. Because as you can imagine, if we're sending patient information, name, age, sex, diagnosis, lab results, that is all like under HIPAA. So it's really concerning and something that's really a high priority right now for us as we look at how do we move forward. Because you think, oh, I'll just take my phone out and send a text to the doctor and let them know. Well, when you're sending that information, if you're sending it from personal cell phone to personal cell phone, there's nothing secure about that. Anybody, you could send it to the wrong phone number. You could send it to the wrong place. I mean, there are a lot of errors that can happen along the way. And not only that, it's sitting on your personal cell phone, which if you don't have a passcode on it, and even if you do, it's really not all that secure. If you lost it, someone could potentially have access to that information as well. So it's like there's all of these things that are going on that have to be considered. And my information security team would be so proud of me right now. You have no idea. So I just gave you kind of that background to understand the context and why does this matter. Is anybody working somewhere where you guys are using like secure messaging to send information about patients?
I mean, we use this thing, I don't actually, we kind of discussed this within my department, called web paging. So you'll page to the computer that goes, you can choose either content paging physician, or even directors, managers, and it goes to their cell. So I don't know exactly how secure somebody's like first year resident insurance cell phones.
Yeah, right.
But you're sending all this information. So we've actually brought that up with our security.
But then on the flip side, can you get a message back to know that it's been delivered or that there's anything that needs to be done about it, or is it just a one way?
It's just a one way, and they can call, either go to their pager or something like how they have it set up, and then they have to call you back to verbally tell you.
Oh, do you? Okay. Yeah, and I've heard of that before. And that's, I think, one that we've looked at before. So it's awesome because the nice thing about texting, one, I can see that it was delivered. Two, I can see if they read it. And then 3, I could potentially get something back about what they plan to do about it, not orders. Which is important to know because, you know, there are definitely some definite limitations that are coming about and starting to take shape, which is kind of nice, I have to say, with this delay that we've had with not implementing secure messaging. Because even a year ago, there was no real like parameters or definitions. I was really challenged finding anywhere that said, yeah, we have a really good, you know, policy or procedure in place that says what's okay to secure message and what isn't. It's like kind of this black hole. I mean, like you hear about people doing it, but like show me your procedure around it. And it's like, well, we just don't text orders. Okay.
Why not?
So partly because most places have an electronic health record. And so your true order entry needs to occur at the source by the person that's delivering them, or at least being co-signed. So plus there's, you know, there's always that risk of, well, what if they didn't do it? So if the physician said, you know, go ahead and do this, the mistyping, I mean, you have the same risk with taking a phone order, but at least with the phone order, you have a read back. So it's really kind of supporting the process of CPOE, care provider order entry.
I think texting is better than work. I mean, it's not ideal from the source, of course, physicians, I would never take like a Gelatin order or
Right.
text, but like, you know,
So think of,
potassium chat or something like that.
so think of it though this way. So
At least they
think,
can read it.
no, that's true, but think of this way. How many times have you typed something or did voice to text and it was the wrong thing?
Autocorrect is
Autocorrect.
death to an order.
Yeah, a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
So, you know, if they maybe sent something off that was auto-corrected incorrectly, and you're taking that and putting that in, you know, there's that misalignment there. And when it comes to order, so texting is really a means of communication. It's just an alternate means of picking up the phone and making a phone call. That's really what it is. It doesn't replace, though, the process of order entry or documentation. You know, that's the other thing, too. So for us in particular, order entry needs to stand alone. And that's done in the EHR by either a nurse or physician, you know, practitioner, whoever's doing it, they need to be putting it in. And so we really try to promote order entry by our providers. But I think it's a great question. You know, I know that there's been conversation in looking at, hey, is there a way, can I do order entry from my mobile device? And there are some, again, but you go back to your EHR. So when you do order entry, you're using your EHR, you're not using your texting function. But that does tie in really nicely to different technologies. So how many different applications do you really want to have to access in order to do one thing? That's the other thing that you have to look at. So kind of going into this whole process of things you have to consider before you start is really what technology do you already own? Where is this going to sit with everything else? Because we've looked, so I'll just share, Palomar Health did look at Tiger Text. So we have Tiger Text. We looked at Tiger Text. Really cool tool. It's an application. It could go on a smartphone. And it's secure, and there are all of these different things. But it sits outside of everything else we already have in place. So it sits outside of our EHR. It sits outside of our nurse call system, which is where like we have our nursing assignments. It sits outside of all of these different things and wasn't able to really to like work with what we already have in place. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't work really well in some settings. I'm sharing that for Palomar Health, what we have to do, and anywhere, anytime you're looking at implementing a clinical technology, you have to look at what do you already have in place? Where does this sit in all of that? Is it like one more app, one more log on, you know, one more thing to like have to remember to do? And then how are clinicians going to be impacted by that? Both the positive and the negative. You know, like, oh, you know, secure texting decreases like us having to make a phone call to tell the doctor to go look at their lab results. you know, it has the potential to be a really good and a potential negative. Like, oh, I have to like, oh, what if the app logs me out? There, you know, there are certain things you have to think about. What if it logs me out and doesn't alert me? You know, or what if the physician's phone is off and they're not receiving the text? And then how will patients be impacted? We always have to take a look at that. So I don't know about you, but I definitely have opinions when I am a nurse or if I'm a patient sitting somewhere and I see someone on their phone and it looks like they're texting. Because then I am like imagining like, are they texting? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Twitter? Are they talking about how crappy their day is? Like it just, I mean, and I do this. I am in technology. And so, you know, it's stuff to be aware of how are patients going to perceive it, which then comes back to that communication piece. So tying into the implementation side of it, it's that communication piece of sharing with patients and family members the tools you have and how you're using them. You know, that's like one of the best things I ever did when I was at bedside was sharing with patients and family members like, okay, I have to put all this information into the computer. I would flip the screen around so they could see what I was doing. Because when they saw all of the stuff I had to put in, they were like, oh my gosh, like, I'm like, I promise I'm not ignoring you. I'm asking you questions. I know I'm looking at the computer, but it's just because I have to get this information in. And they were far more understanding when they understood how and why I was doing stuff. And that I wasn't just, you know, surfing the web and looking for where I wanted to go eat after work. And it's the same thing with phones, you know, and with texting. As you bring in new technologies, when it looks like you have a cell phone that they could misconstrue as your personal device, again, they could go to making up stories. So if you're sharing with them, hey, this is my phone I use for work, I can share information with the doctor and they'll get back to me. I'll try to keep it quiet. Or when I come in, you know, hey, I've been waiting for a phone call from a physician, so if I get interrupted, I'm really sorry, this is planned. So again, it's just that communication piece. All right, sorry, totally sidetracked, but it's one of those things that it's like, oh gosh, that's like one of those things that we like try to do. And then what will happen if we don't do this? I think that's the other thing you have to look at whenever you're assessing a new technology. What would happen if we didn't do anything about this? Because that should really be what's driving you forward. And then your IT assessment. And as I mentioned, that's one of the key things. A lot of times, if they're IT-led, a close connection with our clinical leaders, that's like the best model that I've ever seen. It's because if you have the IT assessment to say, yeah, we have the ability to do this or we have that, and especially when they're looking at other companies and what they can do, they're going to be able to say, that is vaporware. Or, no, that like can't connect, it's going to take all of this work. So they have the insight to be able to support this process. And then I like to sit right in the middle of IT and those clinical leaders to say, hey, let's figure out how to do this. So I'm going to just kind of go with this model of secure texting. And one of the biggest things and first things is having an executive sponsor. Most of the time, these things should be coming from the clinical staff and kind of coming up to IT that way. But a lot of times what will happen, and what's happened many times before, I've been to a conference, another leader went to a conference, and they saw this really cool technology that was so amazing, you know, because they have all of those like vendors and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, we so need that. And then you come back and IT's like, no, we don't. So, but I think that, you know, having an executive sponsor championing along the way is really going to be one of your key drivers in getting things done. I've seen it over and over in my experience, especially when you hit bumps in the road, whether they're big bumps, small bumps, having that executive sponsor to be able to understand what the issue is, what the challenge is, and then they sort of take that onus to say, yep, we still need to go forward. Or, oh gosh, you know what, maybe we need to revisit that and really reconsider if this is what makes sense. So having their engagement in there to provide input, you know, on budget and cost, and being a sounding board. So a lot of times, sometimes just having that person to say, okay, like, this is what's going on, and kind of just having their insight and input to it can be really, really helpful. Keeping them informed along the way is the best thing to do, both the good and the bad. And with the executive sponsor, they have ownership for the long haul. I mean, they are in it. They're in it from the beginning to the end and even past the end. And they really need to be able to speak to the why. Why are we doing this? And sometimes it's, I found most of the time they usually can. They can usually go back to, well, wait a minute, we're doing this because of blah, blah, blah. And when we can sort of refocus, because as you're doing sometimes into the project work, so I know I'm going like back and forth, but when you're like in the project and doing stuff and it's really hard and you're really in the weeds and it's like, why are we doing this? And so a lot of times it's like, gosh, this makes no sense. Why are we doing this? And if you can go back to the why, and a lot of times your executive can help you get back there to say, like, wait a minute, you're so far in the weeds. Let's go back and look back at the big picture. This is what we're doing. So keep working in the weeds because we'll get through there. Yeah.
Let me just ask you a question. Can you give them an example of, not by name, but the type of people, maybe a few different projects that you've had that have been executive sponsors, and how you've linked to them? I'm going with the, what interview question do you have as the subject?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great.
How do you approach them? Why did you approach them? Who are they, not by name, but what is their role in your organization? How'd you get good at digging these people up, making them look at it?
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So have you heard of the modified early warning system in use?
Yes.
So they're flashing up our vital signs on what are the parameters so that you can possibly avert a rapid response.
Yeah.
And they're implementing that in the hospital. First done on paper, and we had to write down all the vital signs, score it all out, and they're just now implementing it on our computer now.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you are doing that. And that was, I don't know what lines that went through to be implemented.
Yeah, for sure. So I will get to yours right after this. So I think that was a great question, and I will probably bring up a bigger project that I was on last year was our long-term care. So our skilled nursing facility, Villa Palm, was getting brought up on the EHR. And, you know, I'm so impatient. I had been ED nurse for so long, and then as I came into this role, I forced myself to learn inpatient workflows so I could understand, so I could speak with my inpatient partners, kind of have a feel for what they were going through. And then we did long-term care. And that was a whole new ball game. Like, what do you mean you only assess your patients once a week? Really? I'm like, what do you mean you don't take vital signs every 4 hours? I know. I mean, it was a very amazing learning experience for me personally to just kind of understand processes. But we had a really, really challenging process related to our medications. So skilled nursing, just kind of high level, skilled nursing is considered like a patient's home. So they have to use like a pharmacy who can deliver like 30-day medication supplies, okay? Our inpatient pharmacies don't do that. They're not set up for billing like that, anything like that. So we're finding this real challenge and mismatch within our EHR because we have Cerner, which is more like inpatient based. And we were trying to bring Cerner into the skilled nursing, which they had done before, but not exactly like we did. So we went through this whole process. I mean, when I talk about working hard and digging in deep, oh man, we worked so hard to try to make the system work. Like my IT partners talk about like me saying, no, I'm not gonna that's not technically possible. Let's figure it out. Like, let's find a way. There has to be a way for us to do this. And we nurses are like experts at workarounds, right? Like, we are the best at finding a workaround. If there is a workaround to be had, we will find it, even if it doesn't need to exist, right? Like, even if we don't need the workaround, we'll find it. So I was leveraging all of my workaround to try to figure out how to make this work. And we just couldn't, because we would like make a change and then we tested all the way through the process. And I was like, oh, it failed there. okay, let's try this. And so we'd run it through, and then it would fail somewhere else and fail somewhere else. And it was like, this is just not safe. We can't do it. And so at that point, so she is our executive vice president. Don't ask me the last piece of it, but she's basically over skilled nursing and some of our outpatient areas. And so we had to engage her. So the project team came together, our project manager sort of coordinated the effort around, okay, like, let's kind of share what we've done. Let's share the pain that you've gone through. And then we need to get, you know, feedback from our executive sponsor on where we're going to go with this. Because it was really like, gosh, this is a big one. And like, there's one of two ways we can go. And talk about, I was sitting there going, why are we doing this project? Like, throwing my, like, I wanted to throw papers and be like, I'm done with this project. It was really, really hard. But that's where we engaged our executive sponsor in that process, was to say, okay, so brought her in and said, okay, this is where we're at. Really, you know, we tried all of these things. So we tested through this, we tried testing through that, we tested through that. Not going too far in the weeds, but just to help her understand the level of assessment and scrutiny that we did to try to get there. She was able to then understand, oh, okay, that's where you're at. And then kind of went, okay, well, could you bring me back like 2 feasible options, 2 options that you would consider safe? And so that's what we had to do. Is so she sent us back, we went back through and said, okay, like, there's this option, and then there's this option. And then I went to my leader, who's over IT, so she's the VP of Information Technology. So, and so I went to her and I said, okay, like, I need you to know what's going on to understand where some of these challenges are and what's going on. So she's like, well, can we just do this? And I was like, well, we could, it's not ideal, but, you know, we could do that. And so it was sort of that collaborative, you know, me going to my leader, but then engaging our executive sponsor in this to help us to get to where we need to go. So, no, that was a great question. So Dory, to your question on the early warning system, did I say it wrong?
No, I thought it was related to what she was asking.
No, actually,
It's okay. We're gonna both learn something here.
You know what? It actually ties in, and I realized I didn't really have anything on the slide to help connect what you were asking, which I sort of connected to how do you decide if anything gets done? So one organization says, hey, we want to implement this. You might have the exact same system, exact same tools, but you do one thing, and a different organization, same system, but doesn't have that, right? And so it's like, well, how does that get even done? Like, why isn't it exactly the same? I get it all the time. We have nurses who work at Sharp and then work at Palomar Health, and they're like, well, Sharp does this person. And then in my head, I'm like, well, we're not Sharp. It's what my sassy attitude does. And then I'm like, yes, I know, but Sharp has made that a different priority. So when Sharp did it, they made that a priority for some reason, whether it was an executive or a clinical leader or someone else said, hey, this really matters to us, we want to do it. Just like Palomar has said, hey, this really matters to us, we want to do it. The nice thing is we kind of share back. I'm not like putting this in anyone's eyes. I keep hitting these side buttons. So the nice thing is it provides opportunity to share information. So we do collaborate regularly. I regularly connect with informatics at Sharp and Tri-City to say, hey, I heard you're doing X. Will you help me understand how you got there? And vice versa. They'll come to us and say, hey, we heard you're doing this. Help us understand how you got there. So being in San Diego County, I think, gives us a real opportunity to connect, to understand lessons learned. Like, that's like one of my favorite things. Like, tell me how you got there and what wouldn't you, like, what did you learn during that? Does that kind of help? Does that help connect those dots?
Can I have a question about that Cerner project? For long-term care. So you brought Cerner to long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you decide, well, I don't know, I'm just trying to understand, to bring Cerner that's designed for inpatient to long-term versus buying EHR, if there is one. There's so many EHRs out there.
Yeah, there
They're
are.
designed for long-term care already.
Yes.
So what was the benefit of bringing Cerner?
So part of it is, so we are a Cerner shop. Our IT department is actually outsourced to Cerner IT Works, which does have some leverage in us making decisions. The other part of us bringing it in is that Cerner already had this tool developed. So Cerner Long-Term Care has actually been in a lot of other long-term care facilities. So we weren't like a first place to bring it in. And the other piece was the decision to even go electronic was, I believe there was a regulation that was coming about saying that skilled nursing facilities had to go electronic. And I think that's actually been postponed now. Like it was like, it might have been by 2018 that they had to be, but then I think they delayed it. So we're on, yeah.
Have they done any studies? Because if skilled nursing facilities go electronic, patient care is just gonna go, like, I can't even imagine what's gonna happen.
Do you know what? So our long-term care facility, they actually had already had iPads that they were, our CNAs were doing their, and I know I'm gonna mess it up, I don't remember what it's called, but like their daily stuff they have to do and they document. So there's a really specific tool that was a Cerner product that we had brought in, I think about 1.5 years before. And it was like an electronic way to capture, which helped feed into the MDS. So it was already kind of a tool that was in place to help them capture documentation faster. And then when we implemented, so I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, oh my gosh, how are these poor nurses going to like manage this? And you know what? We've had so much positive feedback from them. They definitely had to revisit some workflows with how they did certain like meetings. So they do like their interdisciplinary team meetings. They sort of had to revisit how they access the information because they were used to having this big old paper chart that they'd kind of flip through and go through and look at all those notes. And it was just sort of a reorientation of, okay, we don't have this big paper chart anymore, but we still have a tool. And I have to say, I'm really proud of what we took their workflow considerations into play when we put it in. So we created like certain tasks that made sense for them. They were engaged all along the way. So we've actually had a lot of positive feedback from the nurses that they actually feel like they're spending more time with their patients and not less. They don't feel like they're like in front of the computer the whole day and never interacting with their patients. But I mean, it is a good point. And, you know, I think if it's not implemented in alignment with like bringing in your super users and bringing in staff who are really doing the work to push back to say, this won't work for us, you do have that risk. Absolutely. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to run through this kind of quickly. So key stakeholders. This is always a big thing early in projects is identifying your key stakeholders and really those multidisciplinary groups where you need them. And asking the question, who should be here? Especially when you're starting to think about it, because a lot of times there are people who you wouldn't necessarily think of who should be part of the process. What was that question? No, okay. And then having the right people in the right room. So your informal leaders and people that will challenge. So it's, for me, it's tough having sometimes those like vocal people who are like, no, this won't work, no, this won't work. But actually, they actually can bring a lot to it to really challenge the why, to challenge how we're gonna do it, all of that. And then involve them early and involve them for the long term. I have to say one of my best experiences early in this process was being part of the design team that brought in those phones and talked about what tools are we going to use in the new hospital to improve communications. I was involved in it early and kind of continue on throughout. And it was actually really great because it's like I understood why did we even do it this way. Part of the process is identifying the non-negotiables. So what do you have to have with bringing in this new technology? So like with secure texting, it's really like, okay, we have to be able to deliver it to the right physician, the right time. We have to know that they received it. We have to know, that they can send messages back to the right person. And then what's nice to have? Oh, well, they can also, look at their EKGs from here. I mean, there's other stuff that's nice to have, but you have to really identify those non-negotiables. And this is actually a really important document along the way, because you'll end up revisiting those non-negotiables and those nice to haves. And you actually may end up figuring out, hey, those things that one thing that we thought was a non-negotiable is really a nice to have. And then it also helps to identify your scope. So the scope of the project is really important, especially for scope creep, which happens all the time. Like, oh, hey, we need that. Oh yeah, we need that. Oh, that's only like $10,000 more, $100,000 more. And before you know it, you have this massive project. So the fun part, this is what I call the fun part in assessing new software and technology, are the demos. Getting to see what tools are out there, like what's available, how could it work? And again, there's that vaporware. And then getting to talk to other clients and hearing their experiences, seeing how they use it. Those are really like great learning opportunities. And this is where you'll use those non-negotiables to say, okay, we have to see these 5 things or don't even bother showing up. Like this is like, they know for sure we have to have these things. And then you might get to enjoy seeing some of those nice to haves. And then sometimes they're like, and by the way, you can also do. You're like, wow, I never knew, I always needed that. And then it's the commitment. So really then identifying, so using that, the non-negotiables, the scope, those nice to haves, that helps you then identify, what do we really want to bring in? Which one aligns best? And then that's where we bring in cost, timeline, and availability. Oh yeah, we could totally do that in 3 years. Oh, well, that's not going to work for us, And so it's kind of looking towards that. And then on to the project implementation process. I'm probably at time.
Just a couple minutes.
Okay. PDCA. I mean, that's like basics. And this is what I do every single day of my life in my regular day-to-day changes and in project implementation.
PDCA.
What was that?
What is PDCA?
Plan, Do, Check, Act. So throughout the projects and throughout different things, we create test scripts. I have to tell you, this is my least favorite thing because it is literally stepping out every single step and click. And not only that, it's, okay, click on this. And then what's your expected outcome? When I clicked on this window opened. Did it pass or did it fail? For every single thing. Oh my God, I get so bored doing those. So that's just me. Some people really love it. But it's so crucial because you can use those scripts for years to come. We've been using and modifying the same testing scripts from our EHR that we started with. So when we went live, oh my gosh, almost 7 years ago? Yeah, almost 7 years ago. We have test scripts that we created and we've added to them because as we do an upgrade, you have to retest to make sure like basic functionality didn't get modified or removed. It also can be used for training. So those scripts kind of help to format the training of, hey, how do you use this? What do we need to look at? Building, so we need to have your IT test environment to make sure this works. So important to have a test environment. And then finding those unexpected things. And then testing and validation, you're using those scripts. This is a great time to engage those key stakeholders. Having them test the product, have them play around with it, best thing to get to do. Let's see. So then education and training is always a big part of this. My bigger focus is on all of the stuff that happened before then, but really thinking about what really needs to be taught to the staff that are going to use this. People a lot of times will play around with new technology, so they'll figure some things out. But what are the key things that they need to know to use it effectively and use it well and not have to find those workarounds? You know, why, you know, I could get somewhere with 10 steps, but there's also a 2-step process. I want to teach the 2-step process, not the 10-step one. But making sure, you know, you decide early what type of training is, you know, considered. What have other places done? Where does this training need to occur? Can it be done as an online learning module? Does it need to be done in person? Can it be kind of a blended approach? Job aids, instructor guides, super users, and then having a go live support model and plan. A lot of times go lives for us, we usually have like a 2-week dedicated go live support model, meaning like IT, there's a command center, there's a phone number you can call with something that doesn't work, and they're tracking all of those. But a lot of times you have people out on the units providing that support, tracking those issues, doing some basic troubleshooting to figure that out. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite spaces to work is in a command center during the go live. I swear we get more work done because everybody's in the room and it's like, oh, let's fix this and let's do that. Wait, can we do that? No, that doesn't work. It's a great environment to work in. And then post go live. So a lot of times that can go on for 90 days, for us anyways. And we'll take a look at those changes that came up, those requests that came, and prioritize. Do they really need to get done? Or is it something we need to push off? Is that, you know, additional costs? You know, is that another $50,000 add-on? Things like that. And then identify a process and a group for those ongoing changes. Like, who's going to say, yeah, now it's time to work on that. Or yeah, we actually do need to do that, or no. So it's some of those things. And that's where your executive sponsor can help during go live and even after. And then we just basically continue going on.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you guys so much for your time.
Now, I would propose that there is not reading for this lecture. This lecture is your reading. So, business plan. I need to know, what was that process that she talked about? Make sure it's in your business plan. You know, that nice circle? Notice she started out by talking about customers, the people that she works with. They're not necessarily partners, they're customers. Cost started at the beginning of what she said. So I just want to highlight a couple of things. Getting back to, sorry, that's okay. Questions for your interview. What's the cost of the technology use? I like what you said. Tell me how you got there. Remember we talked about that? Tell me how you got there. And what were the challenges to getting there? I would think in your interview, because in this day and age, we're not just talking about how much it is to staff a unit. Technology is extraordinarily expensive. Tom, what did you say? $90,000 something?
No, $99,000.
Oops, we misordered. Or oops, I just threw away the $3,000, what was it, the stint? It fell on the floor. Oh God, I have to get another one. What is the technology that these people that you're interviewing dealing with? So pull that away from you. I would think it would be important in your business plan to have some notation. She spent a lot of time about the process of purchasing technology. When you're going to be in a clinic, I don't know, what do clinics buy? They buy portable stuff. They buy all sorts of things that, iPads. Oh, okay, everybody needs an iPad. Oh God, we need 10 of them. Oh, that's going to cost not just for the $1,000 iPad, because now you know there's all this other stuff that you're going to have to be accounting for. So this lecture is very important. I wouldn't say memorize it, and I know it's really early in the semester, but you need to go back to it because what you put in your business plan needs to reflect the cost of technology. And I don't even know what her salary is. If she's over you and her time and how that's going to be factored in, but you're going to need to think about that information specialist because you're all going to be charting on the HRs. So, and you may be texting using type or whatever it is, because you need to know how much those things cost, and that needs to be in your business plan. And that process cycle, I'll have Beth talked about PDSA, use S study, check, same difference. So keep this PowerPoint close at hand as you're going through the semester, because I think it's going to be really valuable in the cost pieces that you're going to need to think of that haven't traditionally been in the course. In 2010, we taught it in our business plan, and now it's up to. So thank you for doing that. for us. Thank you for giving them something to work with. Oh, there was one other little thing. Not little thing. That's one other thing I wanted to mention. There's two terms that she used. You know, we're learning these finance terms. Finance people use the word buckets, right, Tom? And my sister has an MBA, and I'm like, oh, we need to figure out this budget for this year. And she goes, no, they're just buckets, Pam. So they use that word because it's sort of not threatening. So when you hear the word bucket, you're like, okay, that's got a whole bunch of money. And you divide it up in categories. So that was the first word that you should take away today. The second word you should take away is everybody's a customer. Whether it's the person you're working with, whether it's the patient you're taking care of, who you care about, they're still your customer. And that business shift from the word patient happened about 15 years ago to the word customer. And as we do all what they call when you rate everything and everybody and how many times they took a breath when you're taking care of you. What are those called? HCAPS, thank you. It's all about being a customer and satisfaction. So, and that comes down to dollars. So thank you so much. And I will just spend one more minute and turn it over to Gigi about signups, and then we will let you go and see you next week. Please sign up and go to the conference.
So you get to pick your groups to be in, and if you just go right here to week 1 and go to project teams, you should be able to sign up no more than 2 people per project. It should be set up that you can just self-select. But
Do you have any trouble?
if you have any trouble, let me know.
Do you have to know like what you're doing before you?
No, just which people are in the groups. It should be set right, I think, but you have to create this.
Did one person sign up for both?
I don't know. Someone go in and try it. Okay. I think you go in individually and sign up with the person you want. So when you go to it, it will look like this. So there's right now nobody against any of the groups. So you'll just sign up.
Sherry and
Lauren.
We've got any trouble, ask them. So those of you that have to go to a class at 10:30.
Who asked about the RAP use system? I couldn't see. I'm going to show you something.
All right, you are dismissed. Thank you all. Make sure you sign up before you leave though today.
Yeah.
Well, I prefer you do it before you leave today. Have the other person you do it with you.
I know who she is.
Probably the best.
Oh, I would have.
Thank you.
Do you want me to just talk to you?
Did you get a partner in this?
Did you partner? Do you want more partner? All right. I always finish early.
Wait, you're a pilot?
No, I don't even know.
Oh, you mean like just to sign up?
Yeah, we just set up right. Okay, that's fine. All right, so.
There's two things over here.
I didn't bring it.
Yeah.
So there's blackboards. Then why don't you go and then you go to the library somewhere and enter it.
I do it at work.
Hi.
All right.
You're here for training.
Yeah. Clinical training.
Okay, so I'm here just.
Fun stuff.
I want to collect all those cards.
Yes, I want everybody, and there's a little sheet for them to put them on. If you could help remind me, that'd be great.
But I just wanted that.
She texted me yesterday and she asked if I got like a WOC clearance or something, but I got that last day. Do I need a new one?
You shouldn't.
That's what I thought.
It's only per your academic appointment.
Did you receive a BAWOC letter for this?
No, Jeffries here told me that you didn't.
Oh, okay. So I only need because it's the same.
Because you're appointed until you graduate.
I'm sorry, I'm like, what's your last name?
That's how they're doing it now. So I don't know.
I think I remember getting that. It's just like
Yeah, you have to sign it. Yeah.
I'll look for it and then. But I spoke with Patrick and he said he's okay.
I mean, it's not between the preceptor. It's just
the VA. Yeah.
I want to make sure they don't need anything further for you to start. You know, each semester sometimes it seems like things get changed. So I just, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I just like to ask for that final, which is good to go.
I'll be at work tomorrow and I'll make sure everything, because I'm starting clinicals next week anyway, so I'll make sure I have it and get it cleared out.
And if you do make a Suzanne, just ask her if she can send me